Hi, welcome to Poleshift News. It's the 17th of March, guys. Saturday afternoon over here in the UK, and we've got sub-zero temperatures and more snow. They said the beast from the east is back again. So, yeah, well, it's not uncommon when you think about it. After all, we are in the expected grand solar minimum now. And, I was talking to someone the other day, because in one of the last videos I did, I mentioned the fact that we was going into a glacial period, and that we are still, according to records, in an ice age. We haven't left the last ice age, so we're still in an ice age, but what we're not in is a glacial period. And that could be well on the cards, given the fact the sun has gone into a grand solar minimum, and more so because the Earth is going through a magnetic reversal. Both of these anomalies will create the situation for a global cooling. I want to mention something else more to do with superpowers in this world, with global cooling and the recent hyping since the 80s with regards to global warming. But before I do, I just wanted to say we've got the magnetosphere sensor up and running, and I recorded just under 24 hours of data just to make sure that it was getting recorded onto the SD card as it should. But as it's the 17th of March, and on the 17th of the month I usually take both of the SD cards, well, I will be taking both the SD cards out of the magnetosphere sensor and the TriMag, but I took the TriMag out. I thought, if there's anything I can do, at least I can do today the TriMag data. And here's what I found when I looked at it. So this is what we found when we looked at the TriMag data SD card. Now you can see there is probably, let's just have a look. What I'll try and do is get all the entries just so we know how many readings it took. So it took just over 500,000 readings, 557,871 readings. But if you look there, you'll see they're all zeros, which means there was no real readings being recorded up until the first 14 data entries that was put on the SD card. So we lost a month of TriMag data, and we also lost a month's worth of magnetosphere data from this observatory. And I think what has triggered both of these incidences, means they're both lost data at the same time, is that what must have happened early on when we put the SD card obviously back in this, because it ran for about 40 seconds before it went, and then didn't record any more data, because when it starts to record 294.68, and as we can see there's a 0 in front of it, which means this data is not coming from any of the magnetometers, because they're all coded 1, 2 and 3, and 0 is a non-entry on the data. But what it still does is records a something, which in this case is a 294, and the date and time, and that's what it did for the entire month. So I think what had happened is the electric had been cut off by the power company, and when it came back on, what had happened is the SD cards, both in the magnetosphere sensor and the TriMag sensor, had not been reset, so no data was recorded onto either of the SD cards from that point. So I think we can eliminate this happening again by simply putting a battery backup in there, something that will keep the TriMag running for say 24 to 48 hours after an incident like this has happened, and we can run this constantly. Like we'll have a battery bank constantly charging, so that when the power does cut, it just goes straight into the battery power feed and then drains the battery out. When I first built the TriMag station, I was thinking about integrating a solar system backup as well, so we would have a battery and a solar system, that would recharge the batteries up until the mains electricity had been restored in the event of a power cut. I think that's something I'm going to look into, and it can prevent this sort of loss of data occurring again. So, getting back to the point about winters and prolonged cold periods on the planet. During the 80s up until the 2007, I would say at least, we was enjoying more sunspots. As you can see from the disk today, there is very few again. This is becoming a common scenario with the sun now. I do believe we are firmly in the early realms of a grand solar minimum, to say the least, which could slide us back into a possible glacial period. Like I said earlier, 15,000 years ago was the last glacial period, and we are still in an ice age. But getting back to that point again, a little deviation there. During the 80s to say 2007, we was enjoying more sunspots and therefore better weather as a result of those. And our governments around this world have got on the back of this global warming and charged, CO2 taxes on companies, and basically even on the general publics of these countries that have incorporated CO2 taxes and reductions and so on. The schemes that they've all put on. But basically, governments have profited out of something that scientists had got terribly wrong. Because we now know that sunspots are responsible for driving climates on this planet, and as well as other planets within the solar system. And the point is this: if ever they felt the need now to reverse the situation into a cooling period, there is a way in which that could be done by them. And that brings me to something that's recently in the news today with regarding Russia. And what I'm talking about is a mutual agreed, what they call it? A mutual agreed, it's mad, the acronym is, it's mutual agreed destruction, I think it is. Anyhow, it's what happens when a certain amount of nuclear bombs are detonated over the northern hemisphere, and some scientists did do some research and found that it would only take a relatively small amount of the nuclear arson that a lot of the countries have over the northern hemisphere to create such a thing as a nuclear winter. Now, getting back to what's been happening recently in the UK, I'm sure that most of the countries are familiar with the news of what's been happening here in the UK. There's been a Russian spy and his daughter and a police officer hospitalised critically, and the allegations, albeit the words that they're using, is what the solicitors use all these times, where something is more likely or it is possible, or there's other words that these solicitors use, but basically none of it is fact, it's just speculation. And we've had the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, make an ultimatum to the Russian President Vladimir Putin to come clean and admit his part in this attempted assassination. But the thing is here, guys, is that they've used, this is what gets me, basically anyhow, he just told her, the answer he gave her was, look, don't threaten a nuclear power. And I've said this before, when if you look in a school playground before a fight breaks out between two people in the playground, it starts off with a bit of slapping, probably a bit of name calling at first, then it leads to swearing, then probably a little bit of slap, and then someone's throwing punches. And this is no different with these world leaders. And right now, that is what's taking place with Theresa May and the Russian Prime Minister, Vladimir Putin. In fact, I think today we have booted out of the UK all the Russian diplomats, and as a result of that, the Russians have booted out the British diplomats. So, there's a little bit of a tit for tat going on, and it could escalate into something else, because this is the point. Russia have now been accused twice of this. First of all, in the 90s, I believe, with another spy that was poisoned with polonium, Litvinenko, and now this recent incident. I don't remember the guy's name, but it was a similar incident. I think he was a high-ranking military professional in the Russian army who came over here and worked alongside probably some secret agencies, and as a result of that divulged information to the British government, and as a result of that he has been poisoned. And like Theresa May has stated, although there isn't any solid proof of this, it is likely that the Russian government have been responsible, although there is no proof of it. But the point is, we don't know what they're up to these days, and if somebody is using biological or chemical weapons or non-conventional weapons in someone's sovereign state, then I think something needs to be done about that. Because I think also that that could be the first steps to an all-out nuclear war, for a start. If Russia are responsible, which, again, we'll use that word, it is likely, they have used on British territory, in cities, first of all, a radioactive substance and a chemical substance. And if that is the result, I'm sure that as far as these nuclear wars are started, that could be a precursor for a retaliation with a like source. Now, we all know that it is a first strike policy. If you are attempting to win a nuclear war, despite the mutually agreed destruction, putting that aside, because no one will really win if everyone starts launching nuclear missiles, but what it will do is throw the Earth into a cold state again. That's the essence of what I'm trying to say. And, we're not just faced with that being a result of the anomaly that is the migrating North Pole doing that for us, cooling us down, or the fact that the sun has gone into a grand minimum, or, with regards to sunspot activity, and that as a result is going to cool us down. The heliosphere has shrunk, and as a result of that there are more cosmic rays inbound which set up seeding platforms within the atmosphere, and that will cool us down. But on top of that, we've got a possible scenario getting out of control with superstates and continents where there could be even a nuclear exchange, and as a result that will cool us down. The synchronicity of all these events that are currently taking place right now all point to the same thing. And I find that uncanny. And there must be more to the synchronicity. But I'm just saying, it's just, if it's not nature that is doing enough, and the nature of the sun and its activity and the nature on this planet, we have to also add the nature of the vile, repulsive behaviour of humankind as well. And they all spell the same thing, which could be a possible, disaster. I think I'll round it off with this, guys. We take a lot of things in our daily lives for granted. This planet is rotating on its axis at 24,000 miles an hour. If you ever stuck your face out of a moving vehicle at that speed, it would soon be melted off by the sheer friction of the heat, burning it clean off. We've witnessed this when we watch the re-entry of these space vehicles, such as the Space Shuttle and other rocket capsules and the Soyuz, as it comes back into the atmosphere. The bottoms of these things glow white hot. And what I'm trying to say is the environment in space that which this planet hangs is hostile enough. It doesn't need to be made, even worse by ourselves on this planet. Not only does it rotate 24,000 miles an hour, it actually spins around the sun on its orbit at around 67,000 miles an hour, is it? I'm not sure if it's 67,000 or 72,000, but it's in that ballpark anyhow. But it just gives you an idea of the things we take for granted. I mean, The position of the planet is unique in itself. If it was 1,000 miles closer, everything on the planet that was water or liquid would be frozen. And if it was 1,000 miles further away, most of the water would be in a gaseous state. We take all these things for granted, that we do have a sun that rises, and as a result, all the vegetation on this planet photosynthesizes, produces its own sugars, and it's therefore able to grow. These things we take for granted on a daily basis. And the reason for the majority of this that is taken for granted is because we just simply don't afford ourselves enough time to think about these things. This is something that our ancestors did give a lot of time for, such as the Egyptian Empire and the Sumerians and the Mayans. They looked up to the stars. We seem to look down to our iPhones. We're going to end up creatures with massive hunchbacks if we don't, change our ways on this planet. I think that's a good note to leave this video on. And so I'll say what I usually do, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Try not to let too much of these things bring, your mood down. After all, it is an interesting subject. It is an interesting world, and the universe in which this world and its solar system is situated in is very interesting. And we are very lucky to, be allowed a biosphere to live under and orbit such a beautiful star as we do. So I'll just mention before I go, guys, a big thank you to the few people again that supported the channel over the last couple of days, and those that have always supported the channel. I want to say thank you, and if I can, just encourage a few more people to support the channel. We've got a good website, Pole Shift News. If you've not seen it, go and take a bit of time out, have a look, bookmark it. It is a one-stop shop for all the geoanomalies. I'm trying to make it a better one-stop shop than what it already is, but I've had some good reviews off you guys. I know you like it, and I'll continue making it better. And I'll just say the link is down there, guys, if you want to support it. It's crowd-funded by you guys at the end of the day. And with that, I'll say what I usually do. Enjoy your weekend, and bye for now.